Joining us today for primetime local news is Peter Quinlan, once again, a meteorologist with Global News. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shelby. Great to be here.
Of course, glad to be able to have you on here. Now, we spoke recently on the heat waves through Alberta and Saskatchewan, and that's still continuing in most spots, but we're also seeing some days with some strong storms, some very severe thunderstorms coming around the provinces here. So why do you think that is? We just kind of want to be able to speak with you and get your expertise on it.
Yeah, well, we have a few conditions that are making the environment right for tornado and strong storm development. One of those is that we're into the heat of the summer, and that is one of the main aspects we need for severe weather. Another one is we've got the humidity around. We've had some recent rains, and also there's a process called evapotranspiration that comes off of the crops, where they basically emit moisture into the air. And when you add moisture into the air, it becomes more buoyant. It wants to rise, and that's when we get those strong buildup of clouds, cumulonimbus clouds, thunderstorm clouds that develop. And then the third mechanism we need for strong severe weather are low pressure systems. And we've had a few of those pass through, and all of those things act together to provide the trigger for severe weather. And when we have those lows and even sometimes an upper disturbance pushing through, we have the fuel and the rotation in the atmosphere needed to trigger rotating thunderstorms we call supercells and the potential for tornadoes.
We've been seeing quite a lot of storms and, tornadoes around the Saskatchewan area in particular, and seeing a little bit more around the Alberta area, of course, mostly in the central zone there, as we came a little bit more into the end of July, heading into August. Would you say that this is pretty abnormal, having this amount of storms in July and August, or is this kind of on average, or you see on a yearly basis?
We do typically expect quite a few severe and even tornadic thunderstorms throughout the summer months. On average, it is actually still less than normal. Normally in Alberta, we see between 12 and 15 tornadoes on average. On the Alberta side, on the Saskatchewan side, we usually see 17 to 18 tornadoes on average. So in Alberta, we've seen 7 tornadoes so far this year, which is below the average of 12 to 15 tornadoes. In Saskatchewan, though, we've seen 19 or 20 tornadoes so far this year, which is actually just above the average. The reason why it seems like a lot is because, well, it has been in Saskatchewan. And on the Alberta side, the last few years, actually just last year, we only had 3 tornadoes in total. And in Saskatchewan, we just saw a handful of tornadoes as well. So the previous few years, we've had less than our normal number of tornadoes than we would typically see. So this year being around or even above average in Saskatchewan and slightly below average in Alberta still seems like a lot, just because we've come off of some pretty inactive years.
Well, it's really great to hear that it's nothing too crazy. We aren't getting too much more. And, I guess it's better to get less tornadoes than more. And unfortunately, I've been seeing that a little bit more on the Saskatchewan side, but hopefully we won't be getting too much more later on in August. Now, with these storms have been causing not only tornadoes, we have been seeing some huge sizes of hail. Of course, everybody has seen that from that Red Deer storm that was a bit recent. So can we get a little bit of talking about this on the hail sizes especially?
Yeah, and those hailstones certainly are. We've seen them up to the size of softballs, baseballs, which is in diameter up to 11 to 12 centimeters in diameter potentially at times. So that is incredibly large. We saw 70 vehicles damaged from that, people having to pull over and deal with damage on their vehicles because they can't see, and they can also cause injury and even death to people when it hits them. So we've been seeing that because of the extent of the moisture, the extent of the heat, and the strength of the low pressure systems pushing through. That have generated very tall clouds. So basically, there's so much of an updraft in the storm that those hailstones get pushed way up into the heights of the cloud where it's well below zero. It freezes a new layer of ice on top of those hailstones, and then it falls back down, then gets pushed back up, and it gets another layer. So when there's enough of those ingredients, we get those hailstones to that extent. It is very rare to see those kind of size of hailstones with strong storms, but not completely out of the ordinary in Alberta.
And what could you say that we could expect with the upcoming month when it comes to severe storms and, more importantly, tornadoes, around the Alberta and Saskatchewan area for this August?
Yeah, so still the threat of thunderstorms and tornadoes right through the end of August, really even the potential for some thunderstorms and tornadoes in the month of September, but less likely. August is definitely one of our busier months, but most of that is usually toward the start of the month. As we get toward the end of the month, one of the ingredients we lose is the moisture, and that is definitely a necessary one to get the clouds forming and things like that, but things tend to dry out toward the end of summer. So we'll likely see this activity start to die down over the next few weeks and into September even. But there still is the chance of an odd day that we just have the perfect conditions, a system moving in, an upper trough, and also the heat and even some lingering humidity that could trigger more strong storms. These storms will become higher based as we take you toward the fall. So that means it'll be harder to get the tornadoes out of them, but they could have strong winds and still hail and heavy rain associated with them. But that's typically what we see as we head toward the beginning of fall.
And lastly, I wanted to ask, of course, get some tips from you. We did this with the heat waves and spoke a little bit of how people can stay safe and protect themselves when it comes to extreme heat out there. But let's get a little bit more into people protecting themselves when it comes to, these hailstorms when they are caught like that in that situation, like people were in that Red Deer storm, or even when it comes to tornadoes, of course, of what they can do to stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of tornadoes, whenever you see or have a tornado warning issued in your area, you need to get into the lowest level of your house in a room away from windows or doors, into a bathroom or a closet. Put a mattress over top of you if possible. You don't want to be in a room with a very high ceiling as well. So you want to take all of those things into consideration and make a plan well in advance of a tornado warning getting issued. As soon as the warning gets issued, that means a tornado is imminent or occurring, and you need to get into that spot, get your family safe as well, and your pets as well, as much as possible. So for those tornado warned cells, that's what the procedure should be. For severe thunderstorms, whenever thunder roars, you should go indoors, get away from windows because lightning can actually penetrate through them. Get away from metal. You don't want to be out in the open in a field, for example. You want to get inside. You don't want to be touching metal or in the water on a boat. In terms of hail, you want to make sure that if you are out driving and you're experiencing a hail storm, you need to pull out of the highway. Don't drive very slowly because sometimes the visibility gets reduced and you could get rear-ended. You want to get off of the road, pull over in a safe spot where there's a large shoulder, or if possible, just get back home if you are still close to home. You don't want to be under an underpass. That's a dangerous place to be as well. You often get a funneling of the wind, and also that is just not a safe place to cause congestion as well. So those are the tips for those three events.
Perfect, Peter. I know we didn't speak too long ago when it came to the heat wave, but I'm really glad we were able to speak once again to be able to speak on the tornadoes and the severe storms coming around the Alberta and Saskatchewan area. It's always great to get that reminder out there for how people can stay safe and be able to just, hear from your expertise on what we can expect for the rest of the summer. So thank you once again for joining us today.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely is certainly a very important time to stay safe. And thank you so much for having me, Shelby.